It's Beatty. We are going to be talking about porn today. So, this is a bit of a heated discussion, so just hear me out. I'm not against porn or anything, and we'll talk more about it in the video, but there's an interesting post on Reddit, and there's a bit of back and forth with me and the user that goes by Carl Wickman. No hard feelings, Carl. It's just a good debate, and I just wanted to talk about it on a video to bring up my points better because I have the luxury to do that. So let's pull up the post. The statement, porn gives you erectile dysfunction, is the new masturbation makes you go blind scare tactic. So, we need to talk about the history of why masturbation makes you go blind is a thing, and then we can talk about porn in the same premise. There's a lot of nuance to it, and that's what I answered. I disagree, but there is a nuance. Let me explain. What do you know? All right, so I do have notes for this one, actually, so let's see how well I do. We got to talk about this 100 years ago when I really first understood the idea, but this has been a thing in Judeo-Christian Islamic religions for a while. The carnal pleasures make you less close to God, and therefore you're less with the Holy Spirit, essentially. So, Dr. Kellogg was a late 1800s doctor, and he had a bunch of colleagues that basically all thought that we need to live a more aesthetic lifestyle, which means that we cut out most pleasures from our life. So that means less meat, less masturbation, less sex, and even uncomfortable clothes. And all that is going to make us less likely to indulge into these carnal pleasures, and then therefore making us better human beings, more in line with whatever Christian values Dr. Kellogg wanted you to be in line with. And that's one of the main reasons why not masturbation, but circumcision became so prevalent in the United States based off of Dr. Kellogg's and his group's work about spreading the idea that if your children are uncircumcised, they're going to masturbate more, and then they will become degenerates. And degenerates literally come from the idea to degenerate, to lose tissue. So if you masturbate too much or indulge in carnal pleasures too much, you will literally fade away and go blind. So if you masturbate too much, you will go blind. That's the entire premise of it. You are literally splooging away your life force. So, obviously, we know much better today, and there's actually a good YouTube channel called Knowing Better that goes into this in detail about this entire weird period of Christian faith pushing its way into the early American medical field. Dr. Kellogg did some good work in some areas, but then he did some horrific work in other areas. And it's just a very interesting topic to look into, especially if you're an American guy who was circumcised, because then you understand like the entire premise of why you are circumcised. Okay, but anyway, fast forward today, we know masturbation is normal, and more importantly, healthy, and like it lowers cancer risk in males, and it increases sperm quality. So, people have been masturbating for millennia. I regret to report no one has went blind from masturbation. Now, let's talk about porn. And just so I don't seem like a total stick in the mud while I'm talking about this, we need to talk about some of the positives that come out from porn. Mainly, were the idea of sexual liberation. So, it's easier to find new kinks, so you can figure out what you're into faster. You can find it new ways to spice up sex. So, like, there'll be positions that you haven't seen that you will be able to mimic. And then you can learn how pleasurable sex can be if you're from a where sex is morally taboo. So, in a lot of places, sex is not supposed to be pleasurable. It is literally supposed to be a mechanism to have children, and that's it. I think a lot of you guys know sex is pretty damn fun, almost by design. So, if you're in an area that just teaches that sex is not supposed to be fun, which is pretty predominant, and particularly the late 1800s with Dr. Kellogg, you're not going to actually know what you're missing out on. Now let's actually talk about the problems with porn. First, and one of the main reasons why so many of you come to this channel, is that it gives unrealistic body expectations and standards when it comes to sex, especially when consumed at a young age where, let's be honest, a lot of you are going to have a piss poor sexual education. You're not going to know what an average penis looks like, and you're not going to know what an average female body looks like. So your expectations during sex are going to be pretty warped compared to like normal vanilla sex. Most of you guys will be able to get over that in a relatively quick way, but some of you are going to dwell on that to the point where you develop huge insecurities about sex, and that's going to lead to psychological issues with sex. And this is where the erectile dysfunction part comes in, and I'll explain more of that in a bit. Secondly, porn acts like a drug in your brain, so it causes a rush of dopamine and serotonin, especially when you pair it with masturbation. So that literally is the same pathways many stimulant drugs use to give you a buzz. That buzz will need a bigger and bigger signal to get the same like effect after a while. With healthy porn consumption habits, not that big of a deal, but depending on your genetics and your own headspace, some people are going to be able to tolerate that potential drug-like effect better than others. There's a reason why there's porn addicts, right? Not everyone's going to be a porn addict when consuming porn, but there is a tendency for some people to become porn addicts the same way some people can handle their liquor just fine, have fun on the weekends drinking, and some people can't even be in contact with that because it will cause them to relapse. So it really comes down to the person at that point. Finally, it will mess with your subconscious understanding just as any form of media can. And this can impact relationships. So if there's an expectation with sex that comes from porn, like women like it a certain way, act a certain way, blah, 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 that could impact your own mental representation of women in your mind, which could make it harder in the dating field and could make you a worse lover because, let's be real, porn is a spectacle. It is supposed to be very entertaining. It does not necessarily mean it will match up with real life. So we talked about erection quality a bit, and if you can see it in the back, Vigor is great for that because it is a nitric oxide boosting supplement. My business partner, Doc Hank, developed a very strong blood flow boosting, nitric oxide boosting supplement to help with PE, and it's one of my favorite supplements for the gym. So you can get just insane pumps with it because it pulls more blood volume into your muscles while you're working out. Best part is that it's stim free, therefore you can take it any time of day without having it worrying about messing up your sleep schedule. So the problem is that we have issues keeping it in stock because so many people keep buying it. That is available on Amazon and Leviathan stuff, so we should be getting a new order in the next week or two. No promises though. Back to the actual question. Can porn induce erectile dysfunction? Not directly. So we got to look at this from a psychological sense, and this is where it gets hard to study because you can have. So there's psychosomatic erectile dysfunction and then there's physical erectile dysfunction, right? So psychosomatic means you cannot relax enough to have an erection response. Then a physical erectile dysfunction is saying you have blood pressure issues that will lead to a weak erection response. Even though all the shit's going on in your brain is correct, whatever's happening downstairs is not working, and then vice versa. Both of those need to be aligned to have good erection quality. So let's say you've been consuming porn since you were 13, 14. Let's say you've been exposed to men that have much larger than average penises. Now think about it this way, guys. If you're a straight dude, you will only see flaccid, nude penises before the advent of porn. it would be very rare to see an erect penis, okay? Particularly a very large erect penis. So our ancestors, so like even our dads, would not have seen as many gigantic penises that we have seen. So their expectations are lower than ours. And therefore, but back to the real point. So let's say you watch all this porn, you're used to seeing all these, big dicks. You worry that your penis is not big enough. So when you go and potentially hook up, you're going to be filled with nerves, hoping that you live up to these expectations. And that's when the ED symptoms can come in, because you're so tense that your pelvic floor cannot relax and you cannot get a good erection response. It's not necessarily physical ED, and it might not even be able to be treated with Cialis because it's psychosomatic. But that's easy to mitigate in a lab setting, right? Because there's less pressure in a lab setting. I mean, at least I hope so. Then higher levels of excitement to reach arousal. So let's say you're used to this real brutal porn, okay? Real hardcore porn would be a better way to put it. If that's what all of you've been exposed to, when you do normal person sex, it won't be as exciting to you. Therefore, it might take you longer to get fully aroused, and you might not stay aroused as long. That's porn-induced erectile dysfunction. The fact that your erection staying power might not be the best, and you might have significant nerves associated with sex due to these high pressures that you put on yourself to meet this body standard. Does all porn cause erectile dysfunction eventually? No. It comes down to the person and their own relationship with porn. Now, can porn cause anorgasmia, the inability to orgasm during sex? Again, not directly. And that will mainly come down to masturbation habits. This is what we call death grip. So basically, you teach your body that with a certain tightness, friction, and speed to ejaculate with that sensation. If you never had sex before, it is very easy to train yourself to be like this. I had this issue when I was younger where I could only masturbate, or I could only ejaculate with my hand, and it took 6 to 8 weeks to actually be able to finish with my girlfriend. But we eventually got over it. If you use porn, this could also increase your tolerance for dopamine, which means you need more arousal and excitement to get yourself over the edge. Again, it depends on your relationship with porn in general. Also, let's think about this bluntly. Most women aren't walking around with super curves, double D's, 5'2", 48-inch ass, or whatever you're into, right? Most women are going to be probably smaller than that, proportionally speaking, and taller. So less curvy, a little taller. So it's not going to be as exciting to you, depending what you're into, if you're just hooking up with an average, build female. So therefore, it could also take you longer because it's just less exciting. Not trying to be rude to any females, the 0.1 female audience that we have, but I'm just trying to explain that the unreasonable expectations from porn can affect sex for you as well. Now, this is where it becomes debatable. Should you quit porn? That depends. Are you sensing a theme here? I still use porn. My relationship with porn has changed tremendously since I was younger because I have a better understanding with it via sex education and just overall experience. So, the first thing you got to do is get accustomed to what normal bodies look like. And that is easier said than done, but you got to start looking into statistics. There's some very good sites that talk about penis size called Size Unraveled, and they explain to you how body proportions will change the perceived size of a penis. Very useful information if you're trying to get over body dysmorphia that way. Then it's an open secret that porn stars are self-selected for their own extreme proportions, right? So that's what I thought of in the gym today. Most MILFs are not built like a traditional mother, right? Because if, let's say, they did have a kid, they most likely got a breast lift, tummy tuck, Brazilian butt lift 6 to 8 months afterwards. That's not what a real woman looks like 80% of the time. So if you have a MILF fetish and you expect all mothers to have that build, you're sorely mistaken, right? But anyway, other practical things you can do is limiting your total consumption of porn. So, like, let's put this into perspective of drinking. You can have 1 to 2 drinks, let's say 2 nights a week. No adverse side effects, really. You might have a bit of higher estrogen levels. You might have a bit of higher liver enzymes, but all in all, you'll be within normal range. With porn, you really want to kind of follow the same rule. Just enough to give you the buzz, but not enough to make it, to ruin your day with it. So, like, you can do 20 minutes of porn, but I really don't recommend watching an hour of a porn, especially if you're watching an hour of porn per day. That's where it becomes addictive. And then pay attention to your mood with and without porn consumption. My business partner, Hank, said when he cut out porn, for the most part, he just started feeling better about him, like life in general, because the dopamine response was stronger elsewhere. So that way he could feel happier with less, right? Because, like, the dopamine response is your happiness and excitement response. If we're chronically spiking it really high, it's going to get adapted to that very high response. So it's going to take more stimulus for the day-and-day stuff to give you a dopamine hit. So if you feel grayed out all the time and you watch a decent bit of porn, cut it out for a couple days, see what happens. You will see a kind of a shitty feeling day because you're on dopamine withdrawal, but then it'll progressively get better. That's just how basically addiction works. Not necessarily saying you're addicted, but there's a chance that you have a mental dependence on that dopamine spike. So, back to the question. Where are we? This one. Porn gives you erectile dysfunction is the new... So, porn gives you erectile dysfunction. Objectively false, right? It's not the root cause. Does masturbation make you go blind? Also objectively false. But is saying porn can lead to sexual dysfunction a scare tactic? No. There is evidence that it does so. It's an addictive substance. It will have adverse effects in a sizable amount of people. So you guys can watch porn as much as you want. Just understand the ramifications of consuming too much porn. So wrapping this back up to penis enlargement, interval pumping was designed so you don't need to have chronic porn consumption to stay erect the entire time. The premise is since we are constantly redilating the tunica albuginea with the constant pressure spikes every 2 minutes, you won't need to reset to stop the edema from coming in because the tunica can fill out faster rather than your skin. The reason why we needed to stay erect the entire time is because that was a way to balance out the edema response since the tunica was dilated. But if we redilate it every 2 minutes, we won't have the same issue. So, for all you traditional pumpers, just try out interval pumping, see how it feels. Try to cut down on your porn consumption a bit. See if that helps with your mood. You're not going to go blind. You're not going to have erectile dysfunction from porn, but depending on your personality, you might have sexual dysfunction based off of your personality type. That's really my argument. Use porn like you would any other recreational drug within moderation. So, I will see you guys in the next one. And yeah, I don't know. I said I was going to change around my video style, but this seems to be working very well for me. So we'll see what actually happens. And I will have more news for you guys soon. Later.